my pleasure to open the session on environmental sustainability. As the last panel illustrated, I think it's very natural for us to think about how AI is going to impact our built environment. It's kind of natural to think of how technology is going to build on technologies that are already present. But this panel is about looking at how AI can also have an impact on our ability to understand and manage the natural environment. Our speakers today will provide, I think, a wide range of insights on this problem. So just to introduce them to you briefly, our first speaker is Thomas Dietrich. He's the Distinguished Professor and Director of Intelligent Systems Research in the School of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science at Oregon State University. Dietrich is one of the pioneers in the field of machine learning with well over 100 papers in this area. He's also currently president of the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence, the AAAI. He's also a fellow of the Association for Computing Machinery, the AAAI, and the Association for the Advancement of Science. Our second speaker, Ruben Sarkar, is the Deputy Assistant Director for Transportation. He oversees EERE's Sustainable Transportation Area, which includes the Vehicle, Fuel Cell, and Bioengineering Technologies offices. He oversees annual investment of more than $600 million with a focus to reduce our oil dependence, avoid pollution, and create jobs by designing and manufacturing petroleum alternatives and more energy-efficient cars and trucks. Our third speaker is Milind Tambe. Milind is the Helen N. and Emmett H. Jones Professor in Engineering at the University of Southern California. Professor Tambe has conducted foundational research in multi-agent systems and has garnered recognition for real-world deployments of his work on security games. He's also a fellow of the AAAI and the ACM. And finally, Dr. Tanya Berger-Wolf is an associate professor in the Department of Computer Science at the University of Illinois at Chicago, where she heads the Computational Population Biology Lab. Dr. Berger-Wolf has also received numerous awards for her research and mentoring, including the U.S. National Science Foundation Career Award. So those are our speakers today. I'd like to turn it over to Tom to kick it off, and we'll come back with questions afterwards. Tom.
Thank you very much. Looks like I can begin. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about an area that Carla Gomes and I call computational sustainability. And this has been funded quite generously by the National Science Foundation over the last 6-7 years. And it's the study of computational methods that can contribute to the sustainability or the sustainable management of the Earth's ecosystems. And I'm the kind of person who likes to put things into frameworks. So I'm going to show you a 6-stage framework. And you'll actually see that it applies to the previous panel as well, and maybe future panels. That begins with data acquisition. Where do we put our sensors? Data interpretation and integration, and then model fitting, which is the machine learning part that I actually know something about, and then policy optimization, and finally the execution of those policies. So let's start with data acquisition. I'm part of a team on a project called TAMO, which stands for the Trans-African Hydrometeorological Observatory, that's led by professors at the Technical University of Delft and Oregon State University. And its goal is to address a major problem in Africa, which is the lack of weather infrastructure. The map on the top right there shows a dot for weather stations that report reliably to the World Meteorological Organization. And you can see that there's lots of blue dots in the northern hemisphere and other rich parts of the world, and big gaps in South America and Africa. A consequence of this is that it's very difficult to buy crop insurance if you're a farmer, because insurance companies don't know what risk they would take in selling that insurance. And that in turn leads to reduced agricultural productivity because farmers have to plant very conservatively. So we're trying to, our goal is to deploy a network of 20,000 weather stations across Africa, and we have some funding from USAID and other organizations to make a start on that. And one computational question is, well, where should you put those weather stations so that you spend your money most efficiently? And in fact, that's the big theme of a lot of what I'll be talking about today is, how do we take our limited financial resources and use them most effectively? The second challenge is data interpretation. So often you get raw data that might be images, for example, from the traffic cameras in the previous session, or in my case, pictures of insects. So it turns out that the two guys here are collecting a field sample using a kick net of insects that live on the bottom of freshwater streams. And the US EPA does a randomized survey of the freshwater streams of the United States every year. to try to measure the health of those ecosystems. This requires people to identify the genus and species of each of the bugs that they collect, which is very time-consuming. And so in a project with a collaborator of mine, David Lytle, we developed computer vision technology to be able to take pictures like this and turn them into a count by genus of how many of each group we had. So that's an example of data interpretation, going from low-level data to some higher level. A third big challenge is data integration, because in almost all of these problems, we get data that have been collected at many different spatial and temporal scales, and we have to find some way of integrating them. And so some examples here are Landsat data is at 30-meter resolution, but collected roughly at 1-month intervals, whereas the MODIS satellites scan the entire Earth every day, but only give us resolution at, say, 500 meters. The human population census in the US is collected on a decadal time scale, and yet our weather stations we're deploying in Africa give us data actually at 5-minute intervals. So you have this vast array of different resolutions, and it's actually an open challenge in computer science and data science, how to really integrate that in a way that hangs on to the details. Then we come to the fourth step, which is model fitting. And there are many different kinds of models that are used in ecology. One kind is species distribution models, where we produce a map of where a species is found. But more important is to develop dynamical models that capture, say, migration and dispersal. This is critical, for example, in trying to protect elephants and other endangered species. I'm part of a project that's led by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology called eBird, in which we have volunteer bird watchers every day go out and collect data and upload it to the ebird.org website. And this is a map. I took a snapshot from the website where every yellow dot was a checklist that was submitted that day. And you can see the count on the top is, 10,000 something checklists, which is typical. So we have thousands of volunteers every day collecting data, and then we're using this to fit a model of bird migration using a mathematical formalism called the collective graphical model. And here is an example of early results showing our explanation of the migration of the ruby-throated hummingbird. So you can see it's spending its winters, according to this model, in Central America, and then migrating northward, both crossing from the Yucatan into Florida, but also going around the Gulf of Mexico. And one of the things this model can tell us is not just where the birds are, but are they waiting for favorable winds? Do they have preferences about what temperature the air should be? What is the habitat requirements of these species? So then we come to the fifth stage, which is policy optimization. And this was, in a way, addressing the question that was asked earlier, what's going on here beyond data science? Well, I think the very important thing is not that we just collect data and build models, but then we need to use those models to manage our ecosystems. And so here's where we bring optimization algorithms to bear. In particular, we need optimization algorithms that can incorporate uncertainty about the future. Some of the tools we use are things called MDPs, Markov Decision Processes, and POMDPs, Partially Observable MDPs. And there have been several algorithms developed in recent time. I want to tell you about one application project that comes out of CSIRO in Australia, in which they asked the question, what land should we preserve in terms of coastal habitat to deal with sea level rise and the future uncertainty on that? And so they formalized this not for bird migration in North America, but for the Asia and Australia setting. And here are some results showing that their methods, which are the yellow bars, are able to maintain much higher bird populations than a previous heuristic technique, which is the red technique. So, of course, finally we have to execute those policies and put them into practice, which doesn't involve computer science so much, as we've already discussed. And so just in summary then, in terms of my framework, we have where do we put sensors, how do we then analyze the data that we collect, fit models to that data, then optimize policies, and finally put them into practice. References.
Okay, I'm ready to get started here. So for about the past 2 years, the Department of Energy and the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy has been on a very steep learning curve to get smarter about, and pun intended, about the Internet of Things, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and in general, intelligent transportation systems and urban mobility systems. And while I'm going to talk about the nexus of energy and mobility, I will acknowledge up front that we do a lot of work on machine learning and optimization for material sciences, as well as synthetic biology with broad sustainability impacts, but this is about transportation. And so I think that we're all aware of the kind of the shaping megatrends that are happening that are transforming the transportation landscape, increasing urbanization, shared economy, changing consumer preferences, the penetration of social media, and then all of the underlying technologies, whether it's improved processing speeds, the integration of information and communication technologies into transportation. These two things converging together are really causing an upswell or a wave, some would say a tsunami, of change that's coming our way. And our key focus in the Department of Energy is really about how do we stay on top of that wave and avoid some of the negative consequences of energy with respect to future mobility systems. So today we design vehicles independently to be efficient and operate on their own, and we introduce them into an inefficient system. And so with the onset of connected and automated vehicle technologies and safety systems, we're trying to find out whether we can design kind of optimally for the nexus of safety, energy, and mobility. For those of you who are familiar with the Office of Energy and Efficiency and Renewable Energy, today we designed the widget that goes in the car that makes the car more efficient. So the better battery, the lighter weight material, the better engine, and we actually have a vehicle level or subsystem level focus on improving vehicle efficiency. The vehicles are independent, they're unconnected, and they're subject to the behaviors of the drivers who take them and can do as they please. And tomorrow we're acknowledging that we're going to be seeing increasing levels of connectivity, more of a systems level approach. We're going to have vehicles that are automated, working in concert with one another, and we're going to have them working across modes and in kind of a multimodal decision environment. And so we've introduced a new program within the Department of Energy called Transportation as a System, as the name implies, to look at the system. And it's composed of 5 pillars of connected and automated vehicles, multimodal transportation, urban sciences, vehicles and fueling infrastructure systems, and then last but not least, the glue that brings it all together is mobility decision science or behavioral science. Before we engage in any kind of work, a lot of people ask the question, why should Department of Energy work on intelligent vehicle systems? And so we conducted a first level study to analyze the energy implications of connected and automated vehicles and found that on the upside, we can see about a 90% decrease possible if we put these technologies to good use. And on the downside, we can see the reverse, about a 200% increase in energy consumption as a result of these technologies. On the upside, you've heard already today about reduced congestion, traffic flow smoothing, using vehicles more efficiently, and increased penetration of zero-emission vehicles. But on the upside, people may just travel more, they may travel faster, they may have inefficient modal shifting, they may ship and order more goods. And so our goal is to help drive the decision-making that gets us into this lower quadrant. And so we're living in an increasingly complex decision environment. And if you're a stakeholder in this place, how do you make decisions when you have essentially logic and decisions happening at the connected traveler level, so interfacing with your phone, computers and processors on vehicles, computers and processors on the grid, and then decisions that have to actually happen in the urban environment. So how do you bring all that together, all the data together, and make intelligent decisions? We have started work. I'm only going to comment about 3 of the pillars I mentioned. We've started gathering data around connected and automated vehicles and the energy implications. We have a fleet of 500 vehicles driving in Ann Arbor right now, which are actually transmitting basic energy messaging to go along with the basic safety messaging, so helping us develop kind of a set of data for our models. We are developing urban mobility models or cityscape models that then take those individual vehicles into connected systems all the way up to the cityscape and are helping generate new insights in terms of how do agents operate within a city, how do vehicles operate within a city once they're all connected and automated. And then very importantly is mobility decision science. Why do people do what they do? We often don't know what we do, and we're living in a very increasingly complex decision environment where we make facile decisions on the fly with our devices, don't quite understand why we do it, what the energy implications are, and how that ties into overall mobility. So how do we take this and then put this into our tools that will help develop the agent-based models for planning purposes and then to develop the mobility systems at the operating level? And so bringing this all together within the Department of Energy, we have a world-class set of laboratory resources. We have some of the highest performing computers out there, the fastest HPCs out there. We have a significant basis in modeling vehicle performance as well as modeling overall cityscape and mobility performance. We have the tools to visualize all this and the ability to manage vast sets of data. And so our first foray into the connected and automated space is really going to focus on bringing national laboratory resources to bear on improving the energy benefits of connected and automated vehicles. And we're going to do this, I'll just comment, at kind of two different levels. One is at the planning level, so developing planning tools and decision frameworks that'll take into consideration machine learning and all of the things that a city planner needs to have in order to optimize energy efficiency of their transportation system. And then once we have developed that understanding, shifting that to kind of operating systems or the intelligence that needs to go into vehicles and the policy and the technologies that then support the optimal performance about how those vehicles ultimately operate. And all of that comes together under our new DOE Smart Mobility program, where SMART is essentially a play on words. It is smart in terms of the Internet of Things, and it is smart in terms of what it stands for, which is Systems and Modeling for Accelerated Research in Transportation. And this is where we're bringing together 5 national labs to look at connected and automated vehicles, multimodal transportation, urban sciences, vehicle fueling and infrastructure, as well as the mobility decision science, bringing all of those together into one comprehensive modeling and simulation framework that'll enable cities to really break down and analyze all the what-if scenarios in terms of how do they bring intelligence into transportation, and then to use that to help frame up the policy and the technology decisions that have to happen. We have a lot of people that approach us and say, you know, should we optimize powertrains? How should we go about doing it? Should we give CAFE credits to vehicles operating with connected and automated technology? And I think our first step is, what are the energy implications? What are the agent-based models and how do they actually work? And then how do we translate that intelligence that we have in the simulation world into the actual vehicle world, and then set the policies that will actually drive the kinds of logic that you have. At the beginning of one of the other presentations, I saw the Google car, and I'll just make one comment to close. A fully automated car that's not connected, not intelligent, and doesn't have the right logic can be a very selfish car. Right? And so we want to have cars that actually get you somewhere faster, but at the same time help optimize the energy and can bring that intelligence in that helps you kind of co-optimize across multi-variables and make a more optimal system that doesn't get you there slower and more energy efficiently, but actually faster and more energy efficiently. So thank you.
So my name is Milind Tambe, and I'm going to talk about how AI can help in protecting forest, fish, and wildlife. So we all know the terrible stats about poaching of elephants and rhinos, but to understand the problem, I'll focus on Murchison Falls National Park in Uganda, which I visited in 2014 to establish a collaboration there. So there's magnificent animals there, and but there's threats to the wildlife. So I'm waiting for the videos to show up. But there are these threats to the wildlife. For example, this is a snare that the poachers use to trap these animals. In fact, thousands of these snares just in 2014 alone that I was shown. So there's these massive threats, and what can AI do to help protect wildlife? There's a lot, but I'll focus on one particular system we've been building at USC called PAWS, Protection Assistant for Wildlife Security. The particular challenge we focus on is that we have massive forest areas, thousands of square miles to protect, but limited security resources. So the question becomes how to efficiently patrol or protect these vast areas with limited resources. Here's pictures from Bangladesh and Indonesia, 2 places we visited, and this is a worldwide problem. So PAWS focuses on efficiently generating patrols using past data of poaching to predict future attacks, and as well as generating patrols that avoid predictability from poachers. So in building PAWS, we build upon past successful deployments of AI-based decision aids for security in urban settings. These are based on game theory. The first application of this we built was at the LAX International Airport, where this is one of the first applications really of game theory for security. The challenge is that there's inbound roads, but not enough officers to be at all roads at all times. So setting up randomized checkpoints allowed us sometimes to capture people carrying large numbers of weapons into the airport. Underlying this is game theory. This is a way of understanding conflict between two intelligent agents. This is rock, paper, and scissors, putting rewards and penalties for rock, paper, and scissors. Of course, you can analyze and say, player A should play rock, paper, and scissors with a frequency of 1/3 each to keep being unpredictable. The game at the airport is more complex. There's more complex rewards and penalties, but we can solve it to generate randomized schedules for police officers. And this is the armor system that we deployed in 2007 and is still in operation. Next decision aid, for example, for the Federal Air Marshal Service, assigns air marshals to flights on a randomized basis, taking into account the risks of different flights. This is still operational in the international sector since 2009. We also built a similar decision aid for the US Coast Guard, generating patrols in different ports. And around the Staten Island ferry, carrying 60,000 passengers a day. This is a big terrorist target. So the Coast Guard run these patrols. These are our algorithms at work using game theory and have radically changed the Coast Guard tactics around these. And the list goes on. There's patrols on trains and so forth. In fact, there are worldwide applications, including other universities now who are using these game theoretic applications, for example, in Argentina and Chile and so forth. There's been a significant impact in improving security operations. I'll just point out two quick numbers here. One, control tests on ticketless travelers in Los Angeles metro trains, game theoretic approaches versus previous methods, showing that our approach has led to 60% improvement in capture rates of ticketless travelers. And then at the LAX checkpoints, the armor system, you see for the red bar versus the others, there's a 5-fold immediate increase in the numbers of arrests at these checkpoints when it was first deployed, making the LAX officers very happy, of course. This has led to significant appreciation in different security agencies, leading our work to be mentioned in different committee hearings. Here's one. Oops, sound.
As a way of optimizing it.
So let me play again.
We're working with the University of Southern California to utilize game theory as a way of optimizing and scheduling our patrol. Makes it harder for somebody to anticipate where the patrols will be.
So now the question we are asking is how can we take this same technology and use it for wildlife protection? And that's the question asked in PAWS. We divide up the forest area into grid squares. Each grid square is a target where a poacher may strike. And so now using game theory, we can calculate randomized patrols. How frequently should we patrol each grid square? When poachers attack target, we get data. From that data, we can then predict where poachers may strike next, and that allows us then to improve our patrols. So PAWS is a combination of this game theory and poacher behavior prediction. For poacher behavior prediction, we have 12 years of data from Queen Elizabeth National Park in Uganda, 125,000 observations. We have other data as well, but from this one, for example, we can start building up a model. How likely is it that a poacher may attack different grid cells? This can be done using factors like range of patrol frequency, animal density, distance to rivers and roads, and so forth. So we've built this model, and we can show that it's more accurate than other methods of predicting where poachers may strike. So our initial system was built using game theory and this poacher behavior prediction. And it was tested in Uganda and then in Malaysia with our collaborators, NGO called Panthera. And one of the things that they pointed out to us is we needed to really pay attention to geography. The shortest distance between 2 points when patrolling is not a straight line. So we didn't quite understand that, so we went ourselves to Malaysia to understand what was going on. So this is the day we patrolled. This is me and my students. You can see how happy we are. We are getting to patrol in Malaysia in a forest, hacking through the forest, seeing a poacher's camp, and then at the end of the day, completely exhausted, but understanding that the shortest distance between 2 points when patrolling is not a straight line. There's a hidden street map in the forest following ridge lines and riverbed that we need to follow. So PAWS is now a combination of game theory, poacher behavior prediction, and forest street maps. This system was again tested initially in Malaysia. Here's some signs of poaching, poachers left behind lighters and so forth. And what this is showing is that human activity signs found by PAWS was higher than previous patrolling methods. But there is more extensive tests that are being planned now with Wildlife Conservation Society in Uganda. This is a site in Queen Elizabeth National Park where we plan to test PAWS. as well as with Panthera and World Wildlife Fund in India and in other areas of Southeast Asia. But there are many other possible applications of use of AI and game theory. With AVG, a non-governmental organization, we are working in Madagascar for protection of forests. With the US Coast Guard, we generated patrols to protect fisheries in the Gulf of Mexico. And with others in India, the focus was randomized factory inspections to reduce river pollution. So the potential of using AI and game theory for social good is vast. I've touched on a few applications, but there are many more. And not only for forest protection and animals and wild and fisheries and so forth, but coral reef protection or river water pollution prevention or drug design and so on. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tanya Berger-Wolf, and I'll talk about crowdsourcing computer vision in data science for ecology and conservation, continuing the theme that Tom and Milind started. And I'm going to challenge the intelligence of my colleagues, Dan Rubenstein, who is ecologist, Chuck Stewart, who is computer vision scientist, and Jason Holmberg, data architect, in the context, and I'll showcase one particular project in this, which is image-based ecological information system. So images are today the most abundant, readily available, vast source of information about animals and wildlife in general. And they come from camera traps, field scientists, field assistants, but also tourists, accidental photographers, and drones, and automated vehicles of all kinds, and also public albums on social media, such as and YouTube and Vimeo and Flickrs and Facebooks. So there's a lot of information on animals of all species, if we could only take advantage of them. So we have thousands, hundreds of thousands of images coming even from one location, potentially. But can you see an animal in all of those? No? So clearly, to make sense of all of these data, we need automated approaches today. It is infeasible to do this by hand anymore. So AI to the rescue. With the modern computer vision approaches today, part of them that we've developed, we can actually look at these thousands of images and find the ones that contain animals. Not only contain animals, but where the animals are in those images. And we can say this is an elephant, and this is a giraffe, and this is a zebra. But not only that, we can go further using machine learning and artificial intelligence. We can ask, who is this particular animal? And so we can now find Zippy the zebra, and Joe the giraffe, and Paul the elephant, and Sammy the shark. And we can do this for any striped, spotted, wrinkled, or notched animal. So any uniquely identifiable animal, including actually the fins of dolphins and flukes of whales. So anybody who has a distinct mark that is identifiable like a fingerprint of a body print of an animal. So what, right? So we can now make sense of this vast number of images, but it's not enough. We can have now information about the same animal, a whale shark in this case, over the years of all the sightings of that animal. We can combine it with the biological data on that animal, as simple as sex and age of that animal. We have the locations of the sightings. We can combine it quite often with other related data of who else was there, with the habitat information, with the weather information from projects such as Tom described. And now we can track the animal without putting a GPS collar or another tracker. We know we can start building models of why the animal goes there based on the habitat information. But also, we can do things like population counts, birth and death dynamics, species range, and social interactions, so intraspecies and interspecies interactions. We can start understanding also the questions of not only one species, but in the context of the habitat and all the other species there. we can now start also asking questions about the human impact on those, on the activity of these animals, on the species, in the habitat, and how, with the changes of that habitat. We also can form accidental collaborations because scientists who wouldn't have collaborated otherwise now are seeing each other, studying the same animal or the same region. And so we can ask questions of what provides, what facilitates collaborations among scientists, and when do they happen successfully, right? So the system, image-based ecological information system, has been deployed also for conservation at Lewa Wildlife, the first deployment at Lewa Wildlife Conservancy, UNESCO World Heritage Site in Kenya. And after a year of tracking the severely endangered, critically endangered gravy zebra species, they found out that the structure of the population, the number of births and surviving juveniles, is not enough to sustain the population. The population will be declining, which they did not realize purely from the census, the monthly census of the patrols of the species. And so that led to the change of the policy of lion contraception to ensure that the predation rates are lower and sustainable for the zebras. Since then, the system has been also deployed, about to be deployed actually, for cetaceans, so humpback whales and right whales and dolphins, flukebook.org, and a starting collaboration with World Wildlife Fund and Turtle Protector, the other IoT, the Internet of Turtles. Right? So, and we now are in conversations in various stages of development with more than 70 species, 70 species to deploy the system, right? But it also, not only we enable now science and conservation, we also, the system like that lowers the bar, the entry bar for participation, citizen participation in conservation and science. All you need is a camera. All you need is to take a picture. So last year, as part of the inaugural Kenya Wildlife Festival, Nairobi National Park opened the doors to anybody to come in and take pictures and do the great zebra and giraffe count. And everybody did come in, from US Ambassador to Kenya, and to kids from one of the worst slums in Nairobi who never seen a wild animal in their life, and were able to participate in the count and provide from images the first count of zebra and giraffe population, accurate count in the park. And this year, we scaled it up to the entire species, the same gravy zebras, 90% of whom are in Kenya, at 45 locations, hundreds of people over 2 days, from local tribal chiefs to tourists with expensive cameras, got over close to 100,000 images of zebras, and we have the entire count of the population. But we can go further. With AI, we can do biodiversity of the world through the lenses of individual cameras. We can go to different species, insects, and different habitats. We can do weather and plants from the images. We can also use microphone, we can use sound, right? We can use maybe other technology, and the question is, what is this? So we can create a good view of the wildlife of the world. And so this is the current state and the challenges and perhaps the future of AI for science, conservation, and public engagement at large scale and high resolution over space, time, and individuals. And this is with the help of a large team and growing collaboration, and you can find out and join us at ibis.org and wildme.org. Thank you.
All right, thank you to all the panelists for just outstanding talks. I'd like to open the panel up for questions now, and again, if anyone has a question, they can tweet it. If you do not have a Twitter account, there are pieces of paper on the table that you can also fill out and hand to our faithful assistants there in the corner. Just to get the questioning started, I thought I would maybe address something that cropped into my mind as I was listening to the talks. So Milan, Tom, Tanya, you all talked about projects which I think were incredibly compelling, and where you really illustrated how by bringing artificial intelligence researchers in contact with domain scientists, you were able to have really, I think, remarkable impact in many areas. But what happens, what comes from those collaborations in the long term? So when the the NSF funding runs out for that project, are there ways to capture that and to scale it out into the science communities so they don't have to go get their AI scientists to go do the next project for them? Maybe, Tanya, would you like to start?
Right. So one of the things that we've discovered is, which is maybe not surprising to most people, is that in this domain, we're going in essentially 1 year from Excel sheets and handwritten notes to cloud-based big data sort of projects. And so we need to train the scientists in the domain to make sure that they are able to take advantage of that. But to make sure that it's sustainable, we formed a nonprofit that goes beyond NSF funding. So Imagebased.org and wildme.org are nonprofit organizations. Full disclosure, I am director on the board of directors of wildme.org. And that ensures that we can get funding, but also the projects, each project for the species is then sustained by the community. So flukebook.org will be sustained by the cetaceous community, and the zebra project is sustained by the Gravy Zebra Trust. So each one now is curated and sustained by the conservation and scientific community that is contributing data, curating data, has and can produce publications, but also raises funding for this.
So for the urban security work, we formed a startup company that is for profit, and that's the way that work gets supported. But yeah, for non-governmental organizations, particularly for wildlife protection and so forth, the main question is essentially software upgrades, maintenance, upkeep, and user manuals, training. So it's not, I agree that this is an important question, and sustenance and maintaining this will require support going beyond from some other nonprofit organizations. And that's something we are actively working on and seeking collaborations for.
Tom, I think that.
Yeah. With the TAMO project, it is incorporated as a nonprofit organization in the Netherlands, and the goal there is to have a business model where we, in addition to making the weather data available to all of the governments involved, sell it to insurance companies, for example, to support crop insurance, and possibly to commodities traders as well.
Thank you. Are there questions on the Twitter feed?
Yes, we do. So we have a question from one of our participants. Is there public data on game theory and predictive models to prevent poaching?
So the data that we have is by agreement with these particular NGOs, but please feel free to email me, tambe@usc.edu, and we can see what can be done. So at this point, this is not publicly available data because I guess they don't want poachers to find out what's going on.
Question.
Sorry, I just want to follow up a little bit. So in our context as well, the information on where the animals are, where they're going, is not always publicly available for the same reason that we don't want to disclose information on endangered species of where they are. And so please do not geotag your data when you put it on Flickr. If you're photographing snow leopards in Nepal or elephants in Botswana, please remove the geotagging information, but give it to us.
Another question?
Question from Brenda Leong. Often benefits of technology accrue to countries that already have more technology. How do you solve this problem?
Could you please repeat the question?
Often the benefits of technology accrue to the countries that already have that technology. How do you solve this problem?
Well, I guess one important goal of a lot of these projects is to do workforce development in the countries that are going to be using the technology. So, for example, the TAMO project, we've run several maker fairs, and we're getting organized to do a data analysis, sort of data science hackathon to get students from across Africa and the United States to come to a workshop at IBM in Nairobi, where they will see if they can do better than the algorithms that we've been struggling to develop on these data problems. So.
Other comments?
Yeah, so actually I think the examples that we've showed explicitly show that the technology is going to places where there is initially no technology. And in our projects we involve, we work with local developers and local organizations, both as citizens, involving citizen scientists, but also Internet of Elephants, another Internet of organization that organizes hackathons for wildlife throughout the world, including but they're based in Nairobi.
Well, one thing that struck me is also, more than one person said we've created a not-for-profit to kind of be a container for this technology and to spread it more widely around the world. So it strikes me that that is a mechanism that seems to be emerging out of this type of work. Do you see that in other areas as well? Other projects?
Well, in some sense, for all these development projects, the biggest problem has always been how do you sustain it after the funding ends, and the history is littered with all these dead projects. So I think it is essential that you have a business model that will support each of these ongoing efforts. Otherwise, it's just playing a game. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that derogatorily. That's all Malin does. But
Do you have other questions on the Twitter feed?
Yes, we do. Regarding Professor Tamby's poacher prediction project, how does the model account for corruption among the patrols?
Yeah, so this is a really very interesting question. From our side, it certainly is an important issue to make sure that the technology is scalable and usable in countries where they're designed to be used in. So for example, when we said, well, here's all this predictive model and game theory, it takes 8 hours on a high performance computing to run and so forth. Well, that's unacceptable to our partners in Uganda and so forth. And so the question then becomes, how do you really build more efficient algorithms, ones that can scale and run on, and in environments where this kind of high performance computing and so forth is not available. And that in itself becomes then a very interesting challenge of how do you design these kinds of efficient algorithms, and that's something that we are actively exploring, but it's a very interesting research challenge.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would say it's a critical enabler for us to, because very often these methods rely on using simulation models to make predictions. For instance, another project I didn't describe, we're simulating forest fires for 100 years into the future. This takes weeks or months if you're just doing it on a laptop. One of my students calculated that he wouldn't graduate for 20 years unless he could get access to high-performance computing. So it's a critical challenge, I think, for universities right now.
Did he get access to high-performance computing, or is he still in grad school?
Yes. Well, both.
I would say one thing to that access question, though, is that we're putting forward programs like HPC for transportation and others where people can then pitch problems that they want to solve and then get access to time and resources at national labs to actually get a sampling of what HPC can do for them.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Right.
Great.
But to follow up on Milan's, we're operating in environments where there is no reliable computing power, there is no reliable power, and bandwidth is quite often an issue. And so designing solutions that work in this, that can use available high-performance computing when we do have access, but also combine it with local, still making it available locally with no internet, with no electricity if necessary, and then sort of the ability to sync, to update, to do sort of a hierarchy of solutions, the quick and dirty, but now on demand versus sort of in background, much more sophisticated models running in the background, and updates and synchronization is key in these settings, I think.
Mm-hmm. Question?
Question from Colin Garvey. The PAWS program is very cool, but how can AI be used to de-incentivize poaching altogether, i.e. fight the cause, not the symptom?
Could you please repeat?
How can AI be used to de-incentivize poaching altogether?
So I think there are really three parts to the poaching problem. One is at the source, one is in the transit, and one is at the destination. So the source is the part that we are focused on, which is how do you try to immediately cut off poaching. The transit, the smuggling, that's the part where, again, AI technology can be used, the same types of things about randomized inspections and so forth, so try to reduce. But then on the demand side, where all these products are going, there needs to be public advertising and so forth. Perhaps that's where AI can be used using social networks and so forth to introduce more persuasion among the populace to try to reduce demand for ivory and rhino horns and so forth. And so AI has a role in all three places in order to reduce the demand, to de-incentivize poaching.
Other questions?
Any use of existing CRM software platforms such as Salesforce and connection to crowdsourcing data? Do you want me to repeat? Okay. Any use of existing CRM software platforms such as Salesforce and connection to crowdsourcing of data?
Yeah. So the question about can we use existing technology. So existing technology such as Salesforce is, again, developed for a setting where you have good access, good, the management of very well-defined and structured sort of clients, and with very well-defined and structured scenarios of use. So certainly a lot of the ideas from that, such as how do you do distributed login, how do you do sort of asynchronous data updates, we use, and we also working with the Center for Applied for Applied Scientific Cyber, CTS, Cyber Trust in scientific. Yes, I'm botched up. But so Applied Cyber Trust, which is helping us design a secure system which controls access to various parts of data from this crowdsourced information. So some people certainly should only upload images, not see them. Others should be able to manage data and so on, just like Salesforce and other crowdsourced platforms. But the issues here, again, are around the bandwidth and who is uploading data and how vast. Animals are not contained within the political and geographical borders. They cross all kinds of jurisdictions, and so our biggest problem is managing across these jurisdictions, across different demographics, across different policies, and across different laws, quite often, of data and human and animal data protection. And so, and then they're posted somewhere where not even in the location where the pictures were taken. And so how do you get it all together in a scalable way, and who is controlling this resource? If let's say the Gravy Zebra Trust is managing the data, how do we work with them and get all this data back to them? So that's a huge question where we rely more on crowdsourcing platforms that are much more distributed, such as iNaturalist, maybe models, or eBird models, which work with unstructured environments, but yet sort of create structured data out of it.
If I could just maybe pick up on that a second. So really this is leading toward citizen science, and we've seen many examples where that has had a huge impact in fields. The Sloan Digital Sky Survey, for example. Do you see that as really the future of many of these efforts, is growing platforms that allow a broader set of individuals to participate in these projects?
Well, I'm hugely biased in that. Obviously, yes. The answer for me is yes, because that's the direction that we went. But I think it's a mix of allowing huge crowdsourcing and citizen participation, which is then through computational approaches, through AI, is creating knowledge and useful data and information for science, for the domain of interest. And the key to the other benefit of citizen science, it's not only that we're getting great data out of it, or we're getting training data for computer vision or for whatever modeling that we're building, is that there is now an investment. If we're saying, de-incentivize poaching or incentivize conservation, by bringing people and making them part of the process, by just taking a picture, they're now becoming invested in the process of conservation. They're becoming invested in the process of sustainability by measuring the sound pollution levels, for example, or in the science by counting the stars. And we've seen this happen with the same local tribal chiefs or the kids from the schools who have never seen an wild animal. After being part of the process, they start a conservation club because they now saying explicitly, these are our animals, we have to do something to protect them. So that connection to the story, to the real animal that they've seen, and knowing that they contributed to it, I think is key, not only in the developing countries, but also in countries like US and Europe.
Excellent. Well, on that note, I'd like to thank our panel. This has really been an outstanding discussion. Thank you all.